And finally, this book, The Junk Journal, where the filming has been a disaster right from the get-go, and the end result was I accidentally deleted everything. So, original, took random things out of the recycling bin, painted the cover, not going to use that one for my poetry. And then I made this, which I thought was just the greatest. And it's a paper shopping bag. And this one is fairly close to done. I have assembled the book, I've put my poetry into it, and I really like the way it looks. I like the way it turned out. Not done, but really well on its way. When I realized that all the step-by-step instruction, I had the book off camera, I decided to make another one to film. This one, I actually did have another package arrive, so I had another piece of cardboard. And you can see I've done the same thing. I've gone in and taken, well, this one I started to put the fancy paper on. I've taken random bits and pieces from the recycling bin, envelopes, bits of maps, parts of catalogs and flyers, just whatever was available. And I've put it all together. And then I would go back, and anything that I didn't like the look of, I would just put paper over top of it, and then I would mount my poems and add them to the book. So I'm going to show you how to make the covers from start to finish again. Fingers crossed that I don't once again ruin the video. I've joked with you, if I want to become a famous YouTuber, I'm really going to have to up my game. And based on the last 5 weeks, I don't think there's much hope for that. So here we go. We need a pile of random stuff. And so as you'll see, I went through my recycling bin. I also have been working in the camper for a while, so I have a lot of bits and pieces left over from other books. I have one of the Zentangle models, paint chips, just all sorts of stuff that I'm going to use. I found this is the back of the sign I made for the parade. That chart paper actually had a nice cardboard sign. The part that I didn't use, or the nice cardboard back, the part I didn't use for my sign, I had left over. So I can use this to make a cover. I do have another cereal box, and I also have more of this great heavy-duty shipping box. So I think I'll probably show you those two, the shipping box, and then this one will end up being covered with a paper bag. So when it's done, it'll be a handle bag so that you can carry it around. Not for any particular reason other than I think it looks kind of cute when it's done. So let's get to it. First step of getting the pages ready is I have to decide what I actually want in my book and get rid of anything that I don't need. I like the envelopes because they're sort of ready-made pockets, and I think they turn out pretty cute in the book. There's a little card. I already have an envelope that's a much nicer color, so I'll use this one. I might use a paint strip, and I want to put them in piles of 4 because that's going to be the way that the leaves, I'm going to call them, of your book are inserted. They're put in sections of 4. So just going through and deciding what 4 pieces are going to go together. Now, obviously, some of these are way too big, so I'm going to have to trim them, and I'll do that in a minute. So I'll finish getting my little bundles of 4 and then show you the next step. So I have my piles, and in each pile there are 4 pieces of junk mail or scrap paper. My first step, I'm going to fold them in half because eventually I want them to be part of the book. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to fold them in half. It doesn't really matter which way you fold them. If I decide I don't like the look of that, I can fold it this way. Most of the papers are eventually going to be covered up with fancy paper or poetry anyway. I could go a little bit off-centered if I wanted something like that. It's fine, however you want to do it. Now this one of the things that I was trying to work on during this craziness is my Baby Yoda painting. And I'm finding that it's really giving me a hard time. And so it's going to fit in my poetry book about this challenging year. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to trim it. And I want to trim it in a way that the ground and Yoda are featured, and this top part is not. And I also do not want Yoda to have other pages in front of him, because I want him to be sort of an opening, like the open spread of the page. So I'm going to trim, and then when I'm putting together, I want this to be in the center. So I'm actually going to pile it this way so that when I open it up, I see the picture and there's not another piece of paper like right in the middle of it. Or I could decide that I want another piece of paper in the middle of it, and I actually, now that I'm playing with it, like that better. So now I'm going to go back and put all my piles, I'm going to fold them and decide which order I want things to go in. I could trim along the way, or I can trim at the end. Really doesn't matter. And for right now, I probably just want to get all this stuff ready to go in the book. And I might put this going the other way. It's better if you don't put it in too similar in order. So don't go from largest to smallest, smallest to largest. Try to move things around. It will make your book more interesting if it's not so sort of matchy-matchy. So 2, this needs to go in the garbage. I like these paint chips. I have a lot of them. When all went sort of crazy in the beginning, I went to the hardware store and grabbed a bunch of them to do our paint chip poetry. So I have a lot sitting around the house. I have a set in school, so I don't need these and I'm not going to use them again. So I'm using them up in my book. Another thing I'm noticing is that since I started all of this, I have actually started getting some educational materials in the mail. This is Highlights magazine, so this will actually fit a poetry book on school to have information that is school related. Will I keep it that way? I don't know. I might leave some of this visible, or I might cover it all up. But either way, the fact that it has something to do with school is kind of interesting. Now this one, I seem to have too many pages. I want 4 per section. And it will give you a poetry book that has way too much space. They're like way too many pages. But that's okay. We always leave places that if we decide in the future we want to go back and add more, we can. So here are my 4. I ended up not using these. I'm going to go back, just take one more look and see if this is the way I want it. I like that section, looks good. That section looks good. That section looks good. And this section looks good. I might want to take... I might switch out for that sort of crazy looking piece of paper with my baby Yoda. I'm not sure yet. Yeah, I like that better. I like the color of it better. Okay, next step, I'm going to prepare the glue. This time, it's just straight out of the bottle. We're just going to get it in a cup. We're going to get the same paintbrush we've been using all along, and we're not going to dilute the glue. We want this to be structural at this point. I'll be right back. I am right-handed, and so I'm going to have all of the folded sections of the book facing toward the right. It doesn't really matter. I find it a little bit easier to do it this way. So I'm going to dip into the glue. And every one of these, I'm going to put glue along just the edge. I'm not putting glue over here or over here, because if you do that, once you close your book, you've glued your book shut, and we don't want that. We want it to be able to highlight and showcase our poetry, so we want to keep it open. You want to be neat, take your time. Center, most of the pages that I've chosen are going to fit in my cover, so I don't have to worry as much about trimming. If yours are not, this is a good time before you start gluing it all up to trim, because you want everything to be centered. And so if you center everything perfectly and then have to go back and trim, everything's going to be off center again. This is a little tiny piece, but you'll notice I'm going all the way up the whole length anyway. I'm just going to add as much glue as I can, carefully, neatly, without glopping over. And anytime I do that, it's just going to increase the stability. And it's going to end up glued to that page anyway. So I just need to go through all 4 sections, gluing them in place. There are some things that you need to be careful of. If you're trying to hurry and you get glue on the pages, make sure you wipe it up, because anywhere there's stray glue will actually glue your book together, glue your pages together. As I was assembling, I made sure to really push everything into this edge, into the fold, so that everything is very stable. The next step is actually putting it in your cover. So I have a piece of cardboard, folded it in half. Using this center portion, notice I'm not putting glue here. I'm actually going to go back and do the same thing I've been doing with these sections, and I'm going to make sure that glue goes on the edge, only on the edge, and it's a good enough, or it's a large enough amount of glue to make a good bond, but not so much that it's globbing all over the place and gluing your book closed. So once again, you're going to carefully go down the edge, and only the edge. This time you're going to use a little bit more glue, because you're actually trying to take this section and attach it permanently to the cover of the book. So we're going to put a little bit more than we've been putting, but still full strength, still just along the edge, not gloppy. We don't want our book to be glued shut. And we're going to line it up with the fold in our cover. And cardboard sometimes looks a little creasy, so you might have to close it and make sure that's where you want it, and it is. And then I'm going to do that with all 4 sections. I'm going to attach them into the book. After this stage, you would normally let this dry overnight, but I want to put a paper bag cover on it that has handles, because I thought that really turned out cute the last time. I like that. I'm making sure everything is nice and pushed down. And if the pieces are slippery, and if the pieces are piled up in a way where you've got bigger ones on the inside, it's sometimes tricky to make sure everything stays in place. But just take your time and line up. You might want to make sure, yeah, it's right where it belongs. We're going to do all 4 sections. You'll see when we're done, there really aren't that many pages total, but since you'll be putting poetry on both sides, you could put an endless amount of poetry in here. You're not going to. You don't need to. You're going to put the poems that you've written. If you look at the way I'm doing this book and you think, wow, I really don't have that much junk mail. I just don't have enough to do this project. You could get away with 2 sections. You don't really need 4. You can get away with 2. I like it to have up. Now you see what I did not do is make sure that was trimmed down. So the last step after I dry is I'm actually going to have to trim that book. Usually I'm more careful and trim ahead of time, but as I've said, I think this is the 4th time I'm trying to record this book. This junk journal was just not cooperating with me this year. Well, the filming of the junk journal was not cooperating with me. Glue, and then you're going to push everything into that corner, fold down the cover, making sure you push everything in really well, and then you're going to put something heavy on it. Oops, sorry. You're going to put something heavy on it so that it will dry. I recommend drying it overnight at this point. Every time I try to film these for you, I make a new sample. So at this point, I have a bunch of these. So this is not the one I was just working on. This is the one I was working on a few days ago. But I'm going to use this one to show you how to put a cover on it. Again, this step is not necessary. I just like the way it looks. If you wanted, you could paint, color, draw, write with markers on this cover, and it would be done and it would be fine. My favorite restaurant in Mystic has been doing takeout, curbside takeout. And they have these great handle bags. Now you'll notice I have a couple of them. But this one has a staple hole on it. And when I center my book, that staple hole would be on my cover, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take 2 bags, and I'm going to use the best part of 2 different bags. Now it doesn't matter how carefully I trim, because this bag is bigger than my book. And for right now, I'm just trying to separate the pieces of the bag that I want, and I'm not all that worried about being super neat. I'm also not being super sloppy, because if I cut it completely wrong, I'm going to end up ruining a piece of the cover that I need. So this one I don't need. It's got a staple hole in it. This one I need, and the one in the back I need. I want to line them up to make sure that the handles are going to come together nicely. The edges of the bag look nice. Now this part, I'm not attaching it to the book yet. I'm just going to mark how big it has to be. So I'm just going to draw a line. Now there's a piece of paper sticking out over here that shouldn't be. So what I do, instead of trying to work around it, is I would just trim it off. If you encounter something that is not working for you, fix it. I could fix it at the end, but it was in my way right now, so I'm going to fix it right now. So I'm going to go back, make sure everything's lined up again, because I moved it. So now I need to make sure that it's lined up the way I want it to be. I want the handle centered, make sure I like the way the look of it, and draw the line. I need to extend the line because I'm not going to cut it here. I actually need to wrap the cover around to keep it stable. I can't find my ruler, so I'm just going to use the cover of the book. I'm going to move it down a little bit. And then when I cut on these green lines, I'm going to end up having something that's slightly larger than my book. I could, if I was pretty good at crafts and pretty steady with my hands, I could line these 2 pieces up and cut them at the same time. I'm not sure that's the best idea for me this time, because I've had a lot of technical difficulties. So I'm thinking I'm just going to pick it up. I will cut one at a time. Once I'm done cutting this one, I'm going to use this as a pattern for that. It's up to you. You could cut through 2 pieces at one time if you're having sort of a quality crafting day where you're really successful. But sometimes I have days where I'm all thumbs and I just feel like this is one of those days. So I'm going to cut that first part. That allows me another opportunity to line up the bag to make sure everything's where I want it. Carefully trace around the one I've already cut. And then cut down the next cover. When this cover is done, it's still going to be just an ordinary craft paper cover. So even when the book is at that point, you could still go over it with markers, paints, crayons, however you wanted to decorate it. You could use stickers, rubber stamps, whatever you happen to have. I don't have a lot of my stuff at home. A lot of my crafting things for the poetry books is locked in my classroom because I was planning to share everything with you. So I'm doing it the same way you are, just the things that I happen to have around the house. And I do tend to save. I know a lot of you, your moms don't. If they went to a takeout and got a nice handle bag, they would take the food out of the bag, eat the food, throw the bag away. I don't. I tend to save everything because I know I work with kids and I know we're going to do fun projects. So, okay. I'm going to take one at a time decide which is up. And in my book, for whatever reason, I want it to open this way. I want that to be the front of the book. So I'm going to put it upright on my bag, and I'm going to draw a line. Once I've lined everything up, I'm going to draw a line. I'm not cutting. That is what's going to be wrapped up and glued. So I need it to be a little bigger. I need it to fit. I need to know where it is, because first step, gluing. We're going to take the glue, and now we're going back to the diluted glue. So it's not full strength. It's a little liquidy, but it's not soupy wet, because if you do that, if you put too much water, it makes paper wobbly. It soaks into the paper and makes it all bumpy. We do not want bumpy paper. So now we're going to paint it on. We're putting enough so that it sticks, but we're not putting so much that it's going to get absorbed into the book. If it goes a little over here, that's fine. That section will eventually be glued. You do want to put a little extra by the handles. They're going to be a little bumpy anyway, and because it's such a thick section, a little extra glue won't really be a problem there. It might get wobbly, but like I said, with the handle, that section of the bag is already going to be a little wobbly, and we just want to make sure that once you've done all this work and you've put your poetry book together, it stays together. So this is the back that I'm doing right now. Make sure you keep your book the correct orientation. Double check if you have to. Press down. We'll eventually let it dry for a long time. Right now we're in the process, so we're going to keep going, making sure everything's lined up. It's the way we want it. Now we're going to put glue on this extra flap. We want a nice finished edge on our book, so we're going to make sure that everything is glued down so it will be secure. Not too much glue that it's going to be bubbly. Pull up, slide over, rub with your fingers to make sure everything is nice and smooth. And now we have the back of the book, and look at that. It does look very wobbly, so we're going to try to smooth it out. Now is really the only time that you can smooth it out, but it is a paper bag, so it's not going to be perfect, and that's fine. We're not worried about it. Now it's time for the front cover. This time I'm going to put the glue on the book. I'm going to see if that will make it a little less wobbly. My last book didn't have so many bumps. So either my glue has too much water, or I'm using a different method than I used the last time. And I don't remember what I did because I deleted the videotape. And with these books, there really is no right or wrong. Any way you do it works and ends up with a beautiful product and a beautiful showcase for your written words. And that's all we're looking for. We want to showcase the poetry that we've written as we explored our feelings about a particular topic. So, again, we want to line up. We want to make sure that this part, the extra reinforcement, is inside the cover or inside the book and not on the outside. Smooth it down. And yes, it looks like that was a better way to do it. Still a little bit of bumpiness, but not nearly what we have on the back. Flip our book over. Once again, paint this tab, this little overhang of paper bag, because we want it to smoothly go around the corner, finishing off that edge. And we actually want the part that's unfinished, this little line, we want it to be on the back, so you won't even notice it when the book is done. There we go. And now we have another poetry book. This is called a junk journal because it's made with junk mail. It's a great place to go back and mount your poetry when you're done. If you see something like this where it's coming apart, that means not enough glue. And so before you set it to dry overnight, you're going to go back and you're going to add more glue. It will happen now and then, just more glue. Again, not so much that it's wobbly, enough to hold everything in place. That corner came up, so I'm suspicious of my corners. So I'm actually going to pull this one up and put a little more glue to reinforce. Smooth it all down, put something heavy on it, let it dry overnight, and that is how you make a junk journal.